The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us to another edition of Insights. I'm joined by ACC Professor of Political Science, Tim Kuhnlein. And Tim, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And so we're kind of getting away from the election now, but one of the biggest talking points was how divided America was, or how it seemed to be. And so can you touch a little bit about this divided America concept?
Yeah, it's nothing really new. I mean, the election actually captures how immediate the statistics are and how it's playing itself out politically. But we've known for quite a while that the United States has been struggling with divisions on a whole bunch of dimensions. And there are a lot of studies coming out now, particularly post-election, that raised awareness about this, and it's interesting. For example, 8 in 10, according to one study, it's a CNN ORC, which is a market research firm titled Engine Group out of Princeton. They say 8 out of 10 people are dissatisfied with democracy as we know it. This goes back to a previous discussion that we've had. And actually 8 out of 10 people really want sort of a bipartisan solution. And I think this just speaks to this whole issue of what this election represents. We're divided, but what does that mean? And what do people want out of this? And while many believe that this election was a landslide or this or that, the reality is 8 out of 10 people want some sort of middle ground here. And less than 40% believe that Trump had a mandate out of this election. I think that's pretty clear when you look at the statistics that this was a very close election. And 53% want outreach by Trump and the Republican Party to new supporters. In other words, people that didn't necessarily vote for him, but he and the Republicans gained the ground that they have at the federal level.
So kind of speak to people that didn't support him in the first place.
There's actually an earnest, 53% that are saying they want this outreach to inclusion. And I think Trump is beginning to at least use that language.
And so this division, as it seems, it's always people say I don't like this about this person, or I don't like this about this candidate. But what do you think these people are actually want to see? Like, what are these 8 out of 10 people are expecting?
It's a good question. Well, first of all, the people who are most dissatisfied, that's interesting. 60% white evangelicals, 62% of rural America, 62% of whites without college degrees. And the areas where people are most upset and want action, whether it's partisan or bipartisan, are unemployment, immigration, terrorism, poverty, and inequality. So unemployment, immigration, terrorism, poverty, and inequality. And these are kind of universal because we're issues that people are concerned with. Because we're seeing these same statistics play out even more exaggerated form on the world scale in other Western democracies or democratic republics. Where our statistic of America being on the wrong track is 63% of Americans believe we're on the wrong track. In France, 89% of Frenchmen believe that France is on the wrong track. And it's these issues that are really catapulting the discussion. There's also an interesting parallel historically. I mean, when you look back at the 1870s, 1880s, 90s, and into the first couple of decades of the 20th century, when we had equally as significant discrepancies of wealth, we had a populist movement, a populist reaction. There was the progressive movement, but then there was the populist movement. The progressive movement was more urban, more middle class. The populist movement was more rural and more of the disaffected farmers.
It's kind of like the spinning image of what we see today.
It really is. I mean, obviously different players, different dynamic. We're talking about a post-industrial world now versus a sort of a post-agriculture world then. But the parallels are amazing. when you really think about it historically. And when you look at what came out of that populist movement, for example, a series of amendments, the 17th Amendment, dealing with the issue of direct election of senators. We're having all this discussion about the Electoral College. I don't know that a constitutional amendment is likely, but certainly the rules that states abide by could start to change in terms of how we use that formula. That's just an example. And then, of course, the 18th Amendment comes in this context, and that's prohibition, which, of course, wasn't very successful. And then the 19th Amendment by 1920, giving women the right to vote. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
And so you said 63%, or that poll said 63% of people are dissatisfied with the direction America's going.
Right.
Is that a jarring number? Is that something people kind of are always dissatisfied with the direction things are going?
I think it fluctuates. I don't really know the history. That's a good question in terms of longitudinal perspective. But I think when you look at the statistics of, say, the European scenarios, ours is pretty moderate. Like I said, France is 89%, and you see in Austria, Germany, Italy. I think what it speaks to, more than anything, whether it's 50%, 60, or 80%, is I think it's part of the Western world's struggle with dealing with globalization. We're seeing the rise of these sort of radical right nationalist movements, and they're not all entirely xenophobic in nature or white supremacist in nature or anti-Semitic in nature, but a lot of these forces are just simply reacting out of personal concern about their financial situation, and some will lay blame and start pointing fingers. But this is clearly an ebb and flow statistic with who's winning and who's losing in the new formula of a post-industrial global economy where class structures are totally redefining themselves. They're no longer nationally defined, they're internationally defined.
And so you think this kind of draws upon like a fear of globalization, kind of like a unwillingness to...
Or a temperance of it, in a way, to slow it down, let's recalculate this, let's make sure everybody's coming along, because, hello, some of us are being forgotten in the equation. And that could get worse as this plays out. It's interesting when you look at this is another study from the, what's the source? It's an Ipsos Mori study out of England, through The Economist magazine. It's China, Saudi Arabia, India, Argentina, Peru, Canada, and Russia. They all have the overwhelming sense that they're on the right track. Chinese, over 80%. So China, Saudi Arabia, India, Argentina, Peru, Canada, and Russia feel like they're on the right track. They're going in the right. Well, think about that. These are the countries that are improving, they're progressing in this new globalized economy.
Especially a country like China, where they were so secluded, and now they're kind of growing and globalizing and getting bigger and bigger.
And then when you look at the rest of the list, it's some of the more advanced industrial countries that are recalibrating because some of their resources are being shifted abroad. Some people are winning, some people are losing, and there's less satisfaction or less sense that the country's on the right track. And I just think we're seeing the equilibrium on a global scale more so than a national scale, unlike anything we've seen historically.
Some fascinating stuff, and we're going to continue this conversation, so don't go anywhere because there's more insights coming up.